We have a special edition of the Southeastern 14 podcast today. Jake Crain, who has made quite a name for himself. His program is the JBoy Show. He joins us today. And on the front end, excuse my voice, I'm battling a cold, but we're going to go through this, and hopefully Jake will do most of the talking. Jake, welcome to the show, sir.
Chris, man, I appreciate you having me. You guys do a really good job. I check y'all out whenever I get a chance to, and it's an honor to be on.
Well, it's an honor to have you. You have done incredible work in your space. Let's start with football. The Auburn story just fascinates me. Now that it is settled and Bryan Harsin has quote-unquote survived, what are the ramifications for him in Auburn?
Auburn has a habit and a history of kind of, I call it the Edward Norton Fight Club syndrome of just beating itself up, for no.
That's good, yeah.
And the ramifications, I think you got to look at it in multiple ways. Obviously, when you're in the SEC and you're in the SEC West, which is, I always say you have the AFC, the NFC, and the SEC. It's the highest level of college football. It's an arms race. It's a rat race. Any bad PR is going to be used against you in recruiting. Anybody that doesn't think their team negative recruits, I promise you they do. There's just levels to it. But when you look kind of in the periphery, if you're Bryan Harsin, you obviously know there's some people that don't have your back at high places. But if you're Auburn, you were the biggest loser in all of this, because if Bryan Harsin doesn't do well, they're going to fire him anyway. But if he does, let's say Auburn goes 8-4 this year and then turns around and goes 10-2 the next year, well, he's going to be sought after and he's going to have a lot of ammunition to want to go somewhere else. So you've kind of boxed yourself into a situation where, you look at both ends of the sword and they can both stab you. So, being able to hire coaches, because look, it's all about stability. I mean, you look at Alabama, you look at Georgia. I mean, hell, you look at A&M, the stability that they have, maintaining relationships with recruits, being able to go out there and get big time coaches, because big time assistant coaches want to go to places where they feel comfortable. And if you're Bryan Harsin trying to go hire guys, that's why, I was very surprised that they were able to get a guy like Ike Hilliard at the wide receiver coach position. Thank goodness for Carnell Williams and his connections there. It just hamstrings you. And you can't fight in this league with a hand tied behind your back. It's already hard enough when you look to your left and you see Nick Saban. You look to your right, you see Kirby Smart. So Auburn put themselves in a non-enviable position. Bryan Harsin was able to survive. But again, you look toward the future, and either way it goes, there's going to be some skepticism on whether he's going to be around.
How did he survive that? Because I'm watching the stuff come out. Obviously, there's some people there that have it in for him. Was it just a battle of wills for a week where eventually they were going to have to write him a big check and all sorts of stuff? And how do you explain how that all went down?
Well, you have people in places of power, and look, we all know the banker makes the decisions. That's how it works in a lot of facets of business and life and athletic departments and stuff like that. They tried to find cause, weren't able to find it. He wasn't going to take anything less than the $18.3 million that he was owed, because he knew there was no cause. And once it was found out and played out in the public eye that there was no cause, they really had no choice but to retain him. And really, it turned Bryan Harsin into somewhat of a martyr. Being able to hold on to, the Auburn fan base and the Auburn family rallied around him. And at the end of the day, he wasn't going to budge. And I always talk about it's like the lottery. Are you going to take the lump sum and get less money? Or are you going to take the full amount of money in payments over time? He said, I'll take the full amount of money in payments over time, or if you're going to fire me, I'm going to have to take all of it. So he kind of boxed in the guys that were trying to box him in.
I think maybe the second most interesting drama since the season ended was the whole sparring match between Jimbo Fisher and anybody and everybody over NIL. What is your take on that whole thing?
Well, I think it's the biggest compliment you can have. The minute you have Nick Saban and guys like that going after you, it's the minute that you're actually making moves. It's like the old kids on the playground, the mommy, he was mean to me. Well, he's mean to you because he likes you or respects you. I mean, it's something where if they're not talking about you or they're just talking good about you, then you're not doing enough. And what Jimbo's been able to do there, now they've got to do it on the field. There's no more excuses. 8-4 is not going to work. Hell, I think 9-3 might not work, regardless if you beat Bama or not. They've done everything outside of winning it on the field. or at least representing the West in the SEC championship game. So I think it was a compliment to Jimbo, and Jimbo was defending his guys. And look, did NIL have something to do with it? Yes, but it's a lot more even playing field than what people think. I mean, let's not pretend like Alabama doesn't have money, or Georgia doesn't have money, or LSU doesn't have money, or Florida doesn't have money. A&M's got a lot of money, but a lot of people have a lot of money. So I think it was the best compliment they could have, and the last check mark, or the last box to put the check mark in, is doing it on the field.
Yeah, who do you think stands to win and lose with this whole thing within the league?
Well, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm more concerned about the transfer portal than I am about NIL.
Yeah.
Look, guys have been getting paid for a while. I mean, to quote Jimbo, there's been NIL for a long time. Y'all are just hearing about it now. So, I'm all for anything that helps the players. A lot of these guys come from socioeconomic backgrounds that, they take some of that scholarship check and send it back home. And now having the ability to make money off their name, image, and likeness. Because look, guys aren't out there. There's a very few handful of guys that are making an unbelievable amount of money. I mean, they're not just throwing $300,000 at, the backup, the third corner, or the backup punters. So I'm more worried about being able to transfer within a conference and within a division and not have to pay a penalty for that. I'm all for it if the head coach leaves or takes another job or gets fired. You should have the ability to transfer without penalty, even in conference. But if the head coach is still there, I'm not a fan of transferring within the conference. If you want to go from the SEC to the Pac-12 or the Big Ten to the AAC, I'm fine with that. But I worry about tampering and the things that go along with transferring within a conference without any head coach leaving. It just leads to a bunch of problems. And to me, football is not like basketball or baseball even. The roster size, you're dealing with a lot more, and it's a lot harder to build a football program consistently and form a culture and identity in that locker room in football, because you're just dealing with more human beings.
That and the portal obviously go hand in hand. I was talking to, and I'll leave the name out of it, a very experienced writer who covers the school in the SEC, and this would be a school that you would deem bottom half of the league in terms of football status. But he was talking to the compliance guy at the school that they covered, and basically he came away from the conversation telling me that, look, none of these guys that enter the portal are playing for free at the destinations that they land.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, it's just a different flavor of recruiting. Again, I mean, even with NIL, it's something where I really don't have a problem, Chris, if a guy wants to go from Utah to Ole Miss. What worries me, and I'll use the SEC for an example, and look, incentives are incentives. That's not going to change. They opened up Pandora's box. It's going to be about impossible to close it. Now, they're going to put guardrails in it, which I think they should, and I've offered solutions that I think would make it better and make it more efficient. But what worries me is, just for an example, this isn't a real situation, just a hypothetical. Let's just say LSU is playing Arkansas, and Arkansas's got two corners that are really good. LSU's got two corners that they know are going to the draft. They may have missed on some freshmen that they signed, and they're like, man, we'd love to be able to go recruit those corners from Arkansas to come to LSU. That's tampering to me. Or say, you know what? Our corners coach, maybe we need to let him go and hire the corners coach from Arkansas that signed both those kids. I'm more worried about that than I am about the incentives of guys going other places. Because if a guy wants to go to another place, he's going to go to another place. I just think there has to be restrictions put in to make it a little more cleaner when it comes to in-conference transfers.
Yeah, if you're running college football right now and you can make 3 or 4 big changes to all this, what is it that you do?
Well, on the NIL side, I don't think there's a ton that you can put in really, from a capitalistic standpoint, or that they need to put in. Because, again, businesses are going to go with who they want. I think you're going to actually see guys, and in college basketball included, I think Oscar Tshiebwe is a great example of this, that come back to college because of the ability to get NIL, especially if their draft status, once they got their grade, wasn't what they wanted, or they think they could go higher. But on the transfer portal, like I said, I would impose a penalty, a year of having to sit. Even if it doesn't count as a year of eligibility, I'd be fine with that. You could call it, I don't know, a green shirt or something like that within the conference, unless the head coach leaves. That would be the only caveat there. I would also say that if you are going to hire a position coach from another school in the conference, just like the rule is in college, if you're going to hire a high school coach, you can't sign a kid from that high school for 2 years. If you hire a position coach, let's say LSU hires Arkansas's secondary coach, you can't get a player from Arkansas for at least 2 years. Those are two rules I think that would really clean it up a little bit.
Okay, I think we all figure that Georgia and Alabama are going to be at the top of this league for a while until there's a reason that they're not, which I guess A&M and LSU might like a word there. Would you agree with that? And who is maybe that third, fourth, fifth school that you think is best poised for the challenge for the elite spots in the SEC going forward? I think Florida's an interesting one too, although Billy Napier's got some ground to make up there.
Yeah, I really like the Billy Napier hire. I didn't think that got enough pub when they made it. Now he's got to kind of reform that roster, but Billy, does a really, really good job of building culture and getting his guys to believe in him, and Florida really recruits itself. Yeah, I mean, look, Georgia and Alabama are going to be at the top of the totem pole. That's how it is right now. We know football's cyclical. But A&M, you look at recruiting, it comes down to players. It's players, development, and culture. Those are the three pillars that get you to the top. A&M's bringing in the players. They have stability. Even though Mike Elko took the Duke job, was very happy for him. They've been able to retain a lot of coaches, and there's a lot of positive momentum there. They have the resources and the ability. You always got to put LSU in there because, they're the only state school in a state that is unbelievably full of talent, especially at the skill position. You get into the lineman, it gets a little bit different. But I think you'll see LSU. Another school, as long as Lane Kiffin is at Ole Miss with the transfer portal now, I think they're a team to keep an eye on. I think they could do some damage. There's a couple other teams on the periphery that I think are very interesting stories. I mean, you look at Mark Stoops at Kentucky and what he's building there, turning them into a contender in an East that is kind of thirsty for anybody other than Georgia to make a move. And then Tennessee, the only thing that worries me about Tennessee is the NCAA stuff that's kind of hanging over their head. How's that going to go? But Josh Heupel, runs a very interesting system. They're adding depth on defense, which is going to help with the up-tempo style offense they run, being able to move guys in and out on defense to stay fresh. So I think there are a couple teams to look at. You always have Auburn. You never know how that's going to go with what's been going on. But those are a couple teams to keep an eye on that could do some things. But right now, it's Georgia and Alabama and everybody else.
Yeah, Auburn is always a wild card, I think. Florida's the one that really intrigues me because I think they nailed it, and I think you do too with the Napier hire. I just think fit is there. He's a guy who's failed a little bit before, so he knows what that's like, which a lot of these guys don't. Again, the recruiting took a beating this year, but I just think that we may look back and say Florida made the best hire they've made, well, since Urban Meyer, I guess, which isn't that long ago. But in terms of fit, though, Urban always had issues, right? Florida always had all-field stuff. I think Billy Napier's got a chance to win big, maybe without some of the baggage that Urban Meyer had.
Yeah, well, Billy's going to do it the right way, and the thing about Billy is he's put a staff around him. There's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of accountability, but the players they just gravitate toward Billy. And look, when he got hired, whenever you're looking at recruiting, a lot of it is the timing. I mean, it's recruiting is based on relationships. And nowadays, I mean, these relationships have gone on for 3-4 years at most places. It goes back to what I'm talking about in stability. When it comes down to it, if you've been talking to a coach at a big-time place for 3 years, he knows you, he knows your family, your parents know him or your guardian or your grandma, your grandpa, your auntie, your uncle. They know each other. So it takes time to establish those relationships. But at a place like Florida, you walk in with a Florida shirt on when you're recruiting, that definitely gets you through the door. And all it takes is a spark. Just one good year to get that ball rolling. So I think Billy was one of the most underrated hires in what was a crazy, coaching carousel this offseason. And, you look at Mario going to Miami and Lincoln going to USC and the stuff that kind of happened around college football. I would not be surprised in 2 to 3 years if Florida is back to competing for the East.
Jake, when do you think Texas and Oklahoma eventually come over? I mean, to me, it's hard to see that going on much longer. I'm guessing the 2023 season. I don't have any info there, but I just don't think you can leave that hanging like it's been because everybody just needs to move on there, right?
Yeah. Well, there's precedent here. If you remember Texas A&M and Missouri, They still
Yeah.
had a year left on their contract with the Big 12, and the Big 12 was like, you know what? We don't want lame duck teams in here that are moving. Y'all go ahead and go. I think this will be Texas and Oklahoma's last year in the Big 12. I agree with you. I think they're going to go ahead and make their way in the SEC in 2023. And, like they say, like Lil Wayne said, the rich get richer. My name should be Richard.
14 pods, divisions. What does this look like when it settles?
In these situations, the thing that makes the most sense, they never do. I don't understand. I don't think we should have divisions. If you look at it the way basketball does, and I know it's a little bit different, if you treated it without divisions through a 4-year span, everybody could play everybody home and away. I think that's the best thing. If I had to guess, though, gun to my head, I would say it would be pods. That's what I would guess, which I'm not a huge fan of.
I like your idea. Keep your rivals and then maybe have 9 league games or however. I'd have to do the math on that.
Yeah, because look, whenever you add teams, you're going to have to add games. You're adding 2 teams, which is going to push it to 16. You've got to add another conference game. So you're going to go to 9 games. Why not just keep your rivals, like we're talking about, your crossovers, and then rotate everybody else? That way everybody gets to play everybody home and away. That's the best way to do it. It's the most efficient way to do it, which pretty much guarantees that they won't do it.
Jake, let's talk a couple other sports before we leave today. You've got your finger on the pulse of baseball and basketball, and I have for a while too. I've never seen either sport more red hot in the league than it is right now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when I started the show about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and I said when the SEC makes their mind up that they want to be the best at something, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if. And about 5-6 years ago, the SEC decided they wanted to be a major player in college basketball. You look at the coaches that have been hired. You look at the facility upgrades. And now all of a sudden you turn on the TV and the SEC is more relevant than they have ever been in college basketball. And I can make the argument this year they're the best conference in college basketball. And it's great to see. We know the type of athletes that are down here. You look at the environments. I mean, you talk about the jungle at Auburn. I mean, obviously we know Kentucky and Rupp, but there's no off night in the SEC when you're going on the road. And back a handful of years ago, you could go ahead and pencil in 4 to 5 road wins against some of these teams. So the way the SEC is blown up in college basketball, it's fantastic. I would not be surprised if you saw 2 SEC teams in the Final Four this year. And I think there are 4, maybe 5 teams in the league that can make a run to the Final Four. So it's great to see that. On the college baseball side, I mean, the SEC's been so dominant. I mean, they've been dominant in college baseball. They've been dominant in softball. They've been dominant in gymnastics. Hell, if they played quit, it should be a matter of time before the SEC dominated that. Yeah. So it's great to see. It's really fun basketball. The athletes, I mean, the guys, jumping 12 feet in the air to go get rebounds and the speed of the game. It's really fun to watch. And it's been great for college basketball to add more parity to it and have another league that can compete. Now, I never thought I'd say that the SEC was 5 times better than the ACC in college basketball, but that looks the way it really looks the way it is right now.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look at how much better the SEC is than the ACC right now. Okay, here's the question everybody's wondering, and I go back and forth depending on the day. Who goes further in March, Auburn or Kentucky, or do you call a wild card and say maybe even Tennessee or Arkansas, given the way those teams have played lately?
Like I said, I think there are 4 to 5 teams. I mean, you can throw Alabama in there too, and if LSU will just slow down a little bit on offense and stop
get healthy,
that they're an up-tempo team, when they're really not. I think they could cause some people some problems. We had this debate on the show yesterday. Auburn or Kentucky, it's splitting hairs. Auburn played Kentucky earlier, beat them without Ty Washington. The thing that I would give Auburn a little bit of a nod because of the depth, because if JBoy gets in foul trouble, even though I think he does a pretty good job of playing when he's in foul trouble, Kentucky doesn't have a ton of depth behind him in the front court. I love what Keon Brooks has been able to do offensively. We know Toppin has just improved drastically throughout the season. He's unbelievably athletic. You look at the guards. I mean, Xavier Wheeler averaging 7.1 assists a game, leading the league. I know he's been out. Ty, it was a smart decision to shut him down. I think it's really a pick-em between the two, but I just think Auburn has a little more depth, and whether that's foul trouble or guys that are gassed, I would give them a little bit of a nod, but I would not be surprised at all to see both those teams in the Final Four or see Kentucky make a deeper run than Auburn. Then you look at Tennessee. Tennessee's really kind of found themselves a little bit. Ziegler, what he's been able to do offensively, adding to his game. We know he's a witch on defense. Vescovy, who, is probably going to be the villain in a new Die Hard movie coming in the next 4 or 5 years. Kennedy Chandler reminds me a lot of Jared Harper in the way that he plays, a young Jared Harper, not a big guy, but has bounce, has alien vision, seeing the court, and then seeing some of the young guys that they have. Adu's a guy that I think has a really bright future. Plavich, we call him Vakaitis from semi-pro. He's given them some good minutes. So I think Tennessee has really kind of found themselves. They've gotten to a rhythm offensively. You look at them, and, I would lean Auburn a little bit because Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith are just, it's the best front court in basketball.
Yeah, those kids are special. Baseball, my goodness, God help you trying to figure out where this is going to go. Because I think you've got 4 or 5 teams that could easily be national title contenders, and then that's not even, in my mind, getting to Florida or Tennessee or some other teams that are in kind of that second tier that are pretty good. Florida is going to take its lumps early, but I think as those kids get more experience, they're going to be interesting. Tennessee has been better than I thought. My gut has been Ole Miss is the best team in this league. Their lineup is tremendous. I think they've got some pitching depth and experience, which matters, but I don't have any clarity on it, to tell you the truth. What are you thinking with how this is going to play out in the end?
Well, the SEC is going to have multiple teams there. I think it's still really early. I'm from the school of it. It comes down to pitching and pitching depth and being able to roll guys out there, not only, in the front end on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but, set up guys, closers, guys that can come in and shut the door. Because you got to be able to win close games. I mean, you got to be able to win 3-2 1-run games and having the depth of that pitching staff. The hitting's going to come and go. It's like shooting in basketball. Sometimes it's going to be there. Sometimes it's not. LSU is another team, I think, that they've got some momentum. I know it wasn't beautiful here lately, but there's so much talent. It's so early. We've got to see who's going to be healthy on the mound as we go throughout the year. Because like I said, hitting, it's contagious. You're going to slump a little bit. You're going to get hot. But pitching, it's kind of like defense. It's what's going to travel. And I think the SEC has a lot of teams with some really good arms and good depth. It's just going to be who can stay healthy. So, I mean, we could look at 3, 4, 5 teams right now that you had mentioned. I want to get about 3 more weeks in, probably another month in to really be able to see, who's got routine and rhythm on the mound and who has a system that's really kind of working for them and guys that have carved out their roles.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me opening weekend, there was more quality pitching than I'd expected because there were a lot of question marks on these staffs for a lot of teams.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the SEC plays really good non-conference. College baseball world's a lot more spread out than other sports are. There's a lot of good teams in places. I mean, all the way from, Cal State Fullerton to the East Coast, to the Northeast, to the Midwest. You have teams that are able to put guys out there and you can find out. But when you look at the landscape of it, we know the SEC has the most talent. They have the best arms. It's just who can be the most consistent. I'm very interested to see here in the next couple of weeks as we, get toward conference play because, it's brutal in conference. I mean, you're literally, it's a fist fight every night. Vanderbilt, I know they dropped a couple. Don't sleep on them either. We know how talented and how consistent they've been. So I'm excited to see it play out.
Yeah, me too. Well, Jake, we'll have you back again sometime when we could talk a little longer. Both you and I had scheduling issues today that I think we'd hoped to go a little longer than we did. But tell folks about your show, where they can find you on Twitter, any other social media handles you'd like to give out.
Yeah, well, we are launching a brand new show, just signed with a new platform we're very, very excited about that we're going to be announcing here in the next couple of days. The first new show is going to be next Monday, but we're still going by the JBoy Show now. So if you go to Twitter, we're at the JBoy Show. On YouTube, it's the JBoy Show YouTube channel. You'll see the Win the Water Cooler mark in the top right. But we will be changing that name as we go even more national, going to be covering all sports from college football to the NFL, a little bit of NBA playoffs. And, we're going to be all over March Madness. So, yeah, check us out. It's a lot of fun. We talk all ball, no politics. And it's me, that's former coach and player, David Cohn, former quarterback at Michigan, and my brother, former player at Western Colorado and coach as well. So we try to provide as much insight as we can and have a great interaction with our audience. We call them the Booster Club. So going to start doing a ton of that and going live again. It's a live show It'll be from 2 to 3 Central every weekday. Chris, man, I appreciate you having me. You and Blake and the guys are doing a hell of a job, and feel better.
Hey, thank you, sir. Congratulations on your quick rise in a tough business. Thanks for coming on. And again, we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, man, you just let me know, brother. Appreciate it.